Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to do a little bit of a dive on whether or not attaching a flashlight to the bottom of your handgun is a good or a bad idea. I'm also going to do an experiment on one or two of the myths surrounding the handgun with the flashlight, whether it actually improves your shooting or not. Theory being that it extra weight dampens the recoil and you could potentially shoot the gun faster. Before we get started, we must talk about whether or not this is a good idea for any person watching the video. Well, what I've discovered over the last couple of months is it depends. It can be quite good and it can be quite a negative. What do I mean by that? So far, I've discovered that having a handheld flashlight is a lot more useful than having a light on your everyday carry gun. Now, if we're talking about your nightstand gun, that's a whole different topic where I totally believe the flashlight could be useful. But back to what I've discovered. The everyday carry systems that most people use are based on comfort. And it's the first casualty, in my opinion, when you put a light on the bottom of your gun, because your holster gets larger. The footprint of the gun obviously increases. And if you're looking for concealment or certainly deep concealment, you could probably still do it with the right holster, but you're going to pay for it physically. It's just not comfortable. Case in point, believe it or not, this awful contraption I got from Rounded Holsters by Concealment Express. They market this as an inside the waistband holster for a Canik rival. Now, we've seen the rival on numerous times on video here. It's a big machine. Can you imagine, now keep in mind that this guy attaches to the light. Yeah, it does a good job of protecting the trigger pack, but the problem being, can you imagine having that down your britches all day? Now, I know what you're thinking. The rival's not an everyday carry gun. That's true. But I also don't think that Concealment Express should make a shameless money grab by marketing it to be inside the waistband, especially with the light. Now, before we go any further, my lights are the same. I have matching rivals. It's a Streamlight TLR1-HL. Real quick, why did I choose that light? Couple of reasons. One, the rival's big enough to accommodate it. It's been around since late 20, early 21. It's a very well-reviewed light. 1,000 lumens, but more on lumens in a second. And I really like the dual switching being left-handed. And I think most of the time customers do if you read the reviews. So, big gun, big light. And as you can tell, that really doesn't translate very well into an everyday carry system. Yes, they do make smaller lights for smaller guns, but back to casualties, one of the first things you're going to lose, typically, is luminosity. The lumens just aren't as bright. They shrink down to potentially 500 lumens as compared to the 1,000 from the same company, meaning Streamlight. Their TLR7 sub is a 500 lumen light. Why is that important? If we're going to use the light, 1,000 lumens does give the shock factor and momentary pause when it's flashed in your eyes. I don't know that 500 lumens actually would do that, especially when you conclude that 80% of civilian-involved shootings take place in a dimly lit area. Notice I didn't say dark. So it could be dusk. Point of the story is that you don't actually need a light to see or identify a target. So is 500 lumens in your face going to give you the pause factor? I'm not convinced that it would. So we're already losing that going down to a small light. I've talked before on the channel that this is my everyday carry gun because I can open carry. Makes sense. So I put a light on there that works. Now, back to one of the positives of supposedly having a light on your gun is you can see stuff, but can you actually search for stuff with a loaded gun? I would say in most cases, no, and in fact, you should not. If I have to wave the gun around with the light to see anything, I could be potentially pointing a loaded gun at an innocent person. never a good idea. Even if the gun doesn't go off, depending on jurisdiction and the prosecutor, you could be in fact committing a crime, and in a lot of cases, a felony-sized crime. So, not a fan of searching with a light attached to a loaded gun. None of this is anything new. All of this has been out numerous times by industry experts. I don't think any of them would tell you that searching with a light attached to a loaded gun is a good idea. So please do some more research on the topic if you're unsure. Now, one of the other negative parts I've discovered about lights on the bottom of your gun is they're expensive. The one I chose is $150. You can get them a lot more expensive, but you can figure you're going to spend at least around $100. Then you factor in that your holster will have to change. You're going to be in for another at least $60 up to $120 for the holster. And by the time we get rolling, you've bought almost a whole half of another gun trying to get the light to work. Looking at it from that point of view, a handheld small flashlight that fits in your pocket, one, is not only more utilitarian, it's also a lot cheaper. So keep that in mind. Back to tactical use of the handheld flashlight. I know you've all seen the FBI search techniques where they hold the light away from them. Yeah, lights are going to obviously attract the attention of a bad guy. It would be better if your attention getter is off of your person. But at the end of the day, I don't know what the statistics are on how many people have been shot in the hand while holding a flashlight, but I bet it's not very big. So, how real of a threat is that, or a fear? It's very real to law enforcement, but I also don't think that has much of a translatable sort of lesson for everyday carry people. You should, in fact, not chase dangerous things around in the dark. The whole idea behind being an armed citizen is to protect your life and then break contact. Not a fan of everyday citizens that are not sworn officers doing any sort of offensive move, especially in the dark. I just don't think it's responsible, and in some cases it's probably not legal. Another issue that I've discovered along the way that I find to be a huge downside with the flashlight is when you have an optic on your gun, this and this can oftentimes compete with one another. And this is a very, very bright dot we've shown on the channel before from Siley. If this is not at maximum illumination, you can't see it when the light is on, almost in any low light condition. And believe it or not, when it gets dark, it gets worse, at least for my eyes. I do have an astigmatism in my eyes, so maybe that's one of the factors. But hear me clear, if you don't have the presence of mind, if you're one of those people that normally use your red dot on half the lumen, your light is going to totally cancel that thing out, and then you'll be shooting by flashlight.
You can barely see it right there, Matt.
Yep.
Maximum illumination on a dark target. When you move over, it goes away.
So there is a learning curve. There is an awareness that has to come with putting the light on, especially with the red dot, and I don't find that super convenient. If you operate mostly during the day and you're at maximum illumination, hey, you're good. But if that's not you, then you have to have the presence of mind to turn that up before you turn the light on. Less than ideal, in my opinion. A lot of the information on the web really doesn't talk about what goes on when you have light and lights on related to the red dot. So those are the negatives. Is there an upside for most people to having the light on the gun? Well, we're going to see if it actually dampens recoil and improves your shooting performance. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. With that aspect of things, I want everybody to keep in mind that I've actually shot the gun quite a lot with the light on there, so I won't be gaming the drill and kind of not used to it being on there. And we're going to record some times and see what the data actually says. 127. 125. Relative same result. Now, one of the upsides that I can see to the light is depending on what you do for an everyday carry situation, I happen to work in an industrial environment, large facility, secured with a fence, but due to the winter hours, I come and go. Usually I get there in the dark, and when I leave, it's in the dark. And the employees are sort of the de facto security team, if that's what you want to call it, for the facility. So it's quite possible that I could be out in the yard and encounter something I need to see and need a light. I always have my gun, so consequently I always have a light. But back to what we talked about before, that positive can also become a negative if I'm shining the light around attached to a loaded gun. Is that an advantage? It potentially could be, but keep in mind we're also now on the path of lights work great for sworn officers and security personnel. It would be just as handy to keep a flashlight in your pocket, in my opinion, but you do get the aspect or the advantage of sort of gun light all in one package. One of the possible advantages to having the light on the bottom of your gun is its disorientation factor, especially if you choose one like the Streamlight where you can sort of dual switch it on and off. Some of them strobe. I would be cautious, however, telling people that when I use the strobe, it also disorients me. So I'm not sure how that all came to be, and maybe that's just me. I find it just as disorienting as the potential attacker would be. So I'm not sold on that. But it does give you the ability with the fingers flip to sort of disappear into the darkness. Your handheld light could do the same thing, but in my opinion, it takes a lot more coordination. And hear me clear, one of the advantages to this that you don't hear a lot about on the internet is shooting the gun one-handed. Even I'm sure you've all seen this trick here, isn't as easy as it's sort of made out to be on television. If you don't train a lot that way, having the light in one hand and the gun in the other is going to take some practice for you to get good at. And major advantage as far as the actual accuracy goes of the gun, your full firm firing grip should allow you to turn off and on the light as you desire and maintain your firing grip on the weapon. That's an advantage to me that I don't think people spend enough time talking about. They all say, look how easy this is. Yeah, it's easy to hold. Is it easy to shoot? Guarantee you it won't be unless you practice, and practice a lot using that one-handed technique, or perhaps the cross technique, as we mentioned before. So, in conclusion, would I buy another light for the bottom of my everyday carry again? Absolutely not. I just wouldn't. One of my favorite internet personalities is Clint Smith from Thunder Ranch. And to steal a quote from him, he once said that you use your flashlight to find the light switch to turn on the light. Never fight in the dark. And I think that actually makes more sense than the comedic sort of tone that he perhaps meant it. I think that they have a much more worthwhile audience as a nightstand gun than they do on your everyday carry system. As we mentioned before, most shooting happened in dim light, not in no light. Chances are, if you can see the sights on your gun, you don't need the light anyway. If you can't see the sights, one would have to wonder why you're putting the sights on the target that you can't even see the end of your sights. Makes you wonder what you're actually pointing the gun at, or should. So, end of the day, I think it's got a lot more risk and potential problem than it does an advantage, and factor in the cost. Seems to me not for your everyday carry system. Thanks, and don't be afraid to like and subscribe.